Mr Speaker,
Hilary Calvert.
I rise and commend this bill to the House.
Rahui Katini.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There are three main aims in this Education Amendment Bill. It sets out to amend the Education Act 1989 to strengthen the regulation of the tertiary education system by improving and modernising the New Zealand Qualifications Authority's legal arrangements, and to facilitate the expansion of international education and to safeguard the quality and reputation of the New Zealand education system, and to increase transparency and accountability in the tertiary education system. They're all good concepts, of course. Improvements, modernisation, quality, transparency, accountability. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's some other concepts that we might add to the mix. Cultural competency, inclusion, diversity, consistency, equity. From the consultation we have done with Māori education providers, we hear that the international student changes will have minimal effect on Māori students, but could affect the future direction of organisations such as Te Wānanga or Aotearoa in this area. We're also informed by Te Mana Ākona, the National Māori Students Association, that they are opposing this bill and are happy for their comments to be made public. And I guess this brings us to the point that the Māori Party places a great priority on ensuring every aspect of legislation is placed under scrutiny as to its consistency with Māori worldviews and its impact on tangata whenua. We know that unless we provide that specific lens in looking at legislation, that voice will be absent from the debate. No other party here in Parliament is present in this debate, or in fact any of the bills that are being put through under urgency, to speak to the issues from a Māori perspective. Te Mana Ākona told us that Māori students need to be represented at council level to ensure Māori views are heard where decisions are made, and this hasn't occurred in this bill. They also told us that Māori students need to be included in any group that determines key performance indicators for tertiary institutions. Again, this bill does not provide for that. And of course, a key concern for them, as it is with the Māori Party, is the consequences if the Education Freedom of Association Amendment Bill is passed into law. Because if that bill succeeds, as it appears it will provoke increased demand for strong Māori student representation and advocacy if associations are compromised in their ability to represent and to serve students. Māori student representation must be given a seat at decision-making boards throughout the institutions to ensure consistent feedback and representation throughout. They support the need for the student body and their representatives to engage with the tertiary institution on matters regarding student services levies. In other consultation we've had with Māori students, they have the same fear that if student associations become voluntary, the assumption is that much of the services that were previously provided by student associations would be passed on to the institutions. And if this was to occur, this bill gives the Minister the final say on services, so really those services could disappear altogether. The Select Committee did specifically address compulsory student fees and provided clarification on the powers the Minister would have to determine student service fees. They also clarified that the Minister would have the power to require institutions to establish decision-making arrangements jointly or in consultation with the students enrolled at the institution. Essentially, this spells out that if the Minister so chooses, students must be involved in the determination of student services. And I guess our concern remains that the incentive must start with the Minister, that the what-ifs continue to plague us. Representatives in Wānanga that we talked to shared this concern. They were nervous that their future leadership could be constrained in their ability to provide some resources for students because the Minister might not allow it. They were particularly concerned around the student services fees section. In their view, we need to watch out because in a Conservative government, Māori student services could disappear. There needs to be some recognition for services to Māori, and this bill doesn't enable that. The prevailing concern was that it depends largely on how the Minister of Tertiary Education uses his or her powers. If the Minister decides to cut all underperforming services and a focus on educational quality, one has to wonder what compromises will be made and how these cuts affect students. The Ministry of Tertiary Education would have the power to effectively dictate what services a tertiary institution could offer, which could potentially jeopardise student services. The other key concern raised during our consultation was around quality assurance and qualifications, and particularly in relation to the implications for wānanga. As a result of this bill, NZQA are now solely in charge of quality assurance, which means they are taking that function away from the universities. The wānanga are already a key part of the qualifications assurance and qualifications, but their desire is that they ought to have delegated powers for quality assurance. The changes threaten rangatiratanga by taking away the autonomy of institutions and centralising it in government. From the point of view of wānanga, they are disappointed that wānanga will never, it seems, be able to do their own quality assurance in the future. And so we continue to raise the questions from wānanga as to whether NZQA has the capability to do quality assessment for a kaupapa Māori approach as well as it needs to. Universities have always been allowed to self-assess, and the wānanga were hoping that wānanga would also have that opportunity one day. There are other good points in the bill. We support the government's attempt to reduce exploitation of students by some institutions. The changes around the administration of student allowances seem reasonable in terms of enabling data to be accessible for better administration. But our other concerns, particularly in the context created by the Education Freedom of Association Bill, means we are honour bound on behalf of Māori students, Māori providers and wānanga to oppose this bill at its third reading.
Louise Upson.